With 28 years of service to country and community, Sergeant Frank has plenty of life experience to share. When his service was complete, he wasn't satisfied with retirement. Sergeant Frank founded Adopt a Cop USA, a nonprofit organization that mentors kids with law enforcement officers in our schools. His vision is to change the perception of law enforcement one child at a time. This show covers a wide range of topics with people who make positive impacts on others' lives. Houston Gass tells us a powerful story about how God helped him survive this awful situation. It is my honor to introduce the one and only Sergeant Frank.
Hey, everybody, this is Sergeant Frank. And of course, I have my co host.
The Bird Dog.
And today's guest is none other than a very incredible survivor. His name is Houston Lee Gass, and he was shot in the line of duty serving his community in Texas. Houston, tell us the name of the city and well, first of all, thank you for being on the show today. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate what you're doing for our profession and for the future generations of law enforcement today. So tell us a little bit about how this all came about.
Well, Frank, man, thanks for having me on the show. It's exciting times that we've got going on right now. Things are definitely changing, and I can certainly see where a lot of good is fixing to happen. We just need more to step up to the plate to keep it going. Um, but January 6, 2015, I got called into work early, and I was the patrol sergeant for Pampa, Texas Police Department, which is in the Arctic Circle of Texas, up near Amarillo. Um, it was a really cold day, and we got called to a domestic disturbance about. I went on duty at 10:45, and by 10:47, I was on scene at my first and only call of the day at a domestic disturbance uh, where a shot had already been fired at his girlfriend, and um, he had barricaded himself inside the house. So we're standing outside the house, and as cops, we always go, we always play that what if game. Well, what if this, what if that, and that's exactly what we were doing. But the one thing that we don't ever think about is what if something happens to me? Because that was certainly the last thing that I was thinking about that morning. Um, anyway, we had several calls in the neighborhood that there was another guy walking around, had a strange object in his hand. So we're sitting there thinking maybe our suspect, in the time that we were trying to create a barricade around his house, a perimeter, had escaped us. So we decided to go ahead and make entry into the house based on the fact that we needed to know if our suspect was still in there. He had barricaded the door. It took us forever to breach the door. We got in there, um, and it was me, my lieutenant, the day shift patrol sergeant, and a detective that was with us because our department at the time was sitting severely short-handed. So, and we were only a small department of about 32 sworn officers, I guess. So, um, anyway, we're going through the house, and we typical sweep and clear. Um, we get into the very last far back bedroom, and there's a couple doors in there, and one of them is a closet. We cleared that out, and there's another door, and we don't know exactly what it goes into or anything, if it's a bathroom or something like that. Um, and it's a very tight space. So my partners and I that were in there together made a plan on how we were going to open this door. I had the day shift sergeant on my right, the detective on my left. And as I said, this was a very tight, confined space. So whenever I touched the doorknob is whenever the suspect fired through. Um, and he fired through with basically, it was a homemade zip gun that used a 12 gauge round.
Oh
Oh my
man.
gosh.
Yeah, it came through, struck me in the face, knocked me silly and stupid, but it didn't knock me out. I guess you got a thick enough skull for as many years as being in police force,
Well, you
Uh,
are a Texan. I mean, that's
yeah,
another. There's a Texan factor there that most people
um,
don't take into consideration.
there absolutely is. But I tell you what, man, it didn't knock me out, and which I'm partially thankful for. I mean, because here I am, I've just got shot in the face. My vision completely went away from me at that point. So I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. My lieutenant and the detective drugged me to safety as the other sergeant laid down cover fire for them.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if everybody started firing into that door.
Yeah, there was close to 20 some odd shots fired through that door.
Okay.
It
Was
went
this
into it went into a bedroom whenever um, later I found out that's where it led to. Whenever they fired into the bedroom, it didn't hit the suspect even once.
Wow.
wow?
But it was a large bedroom, and he knew what he was doing. He got away quick. I mean, it was a quick pop shot to see what he could do, and uh, then he got away. Um,
So
you
he
know,
shoots you through the door. They drag you up to safety, and then your fellow officers return fire through the door at the
yep,
suspect 20 times, and none of the bullets found their way to the culprit.
no sir.
Okay.
Of course, whenever you're shooting blindly like that, I mean, I don't hold anything against any of those officers for not hitting him right then and there. I mean,
Oh
it is
heck
what
no.
it is. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of things happen.
No,
Um,
I was just repeating that because I want to make sure that our audience can hear exactly what's happening. So no, I don't. I agree with you 100%. And nobody, especially anybody that's ever shot on the range or gone hunting or anything, if you can't see your target, your chances of hitting it are slim to none.
exactly. Um, so they dragged me to safety, and my lieutenant uh, laid me on my side, and I got hit in the left side of my face, and like I said, my vision was gone. I couldn't see anything, and I was kind of starting to freak out a little bit, in that situation. I don't know why I would panic or anything, but
Well, I think you had every right to panic. Jeez.
I think it'd be weird if you weren't panicking
Exactly.
at that situation. I would think that'd be odd.
my lieutenant did the right thing. He laid me on my side, on my left side, so I could bleed freely out and not back into my throat or anything like that, to where it would further block off my airway or anything.
Right.
Um, it's kind of cool how things took place that morning. Normally, our paramedics and things, it would take 5 to 7, 8 minutes for them to get from their station to where I was at. Normally, it would take the same amount of time to get the fire department from their station to where I was at. The fire department was a block and a half away. The ambulance service was maybe 3 blocks away.
Wow.
It's kind of amazing how that all worked. I mean, they called the fire department in. They completely risked their own personal safety because we did not have a secure scene. We didn't know where the guy was. We didn't know if maybe he'd crawled under the house and was planning on something else, whatever. So we're they run up, they come get me. They put me on a backboard. The ambulance is coming straight down the road. Okay. I can hear all this. I can't see any of this, but I can hear it.
Okay.
Okay. They're coming down the road, and I can feel that the fire department is moving me. They got me on a backboard, and I'm not a little guy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm 5'10". I weighed about 260 pounds, and plus, with all your other gear on and everything, you throw another 25 pounds on top of that, and I
Absolutely.
got these guys. carrying me, running towards the ambulance.
So it was the one shot to your face.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thankfully, if there's any good thing to be had out of that, thankfully, the guy was using, birdshot. So it was relatively small. If it would have been anything bigger than that, I really honestly think it would have been lights out for the rest of eternity.
Hmm.
They got me there, you know, being awake but not being able to see things. I was in a little bit of a panic mode. They were really trying to calm me down, and I was working on calming myself down because I knew that the more freaked out that I got, the worse things would get. Um, so I sat there and they started working on me. And, I think one of the biggest reasons why I was left awake was, amazingly, I was able to talk. How, I don't know, because my chin was sitting down about the middle of my chest.
Oh wow.
So, um, you know, God really um, provided some divine intervention there. I am deathly, I am deathly allergic to morphine. I had to learn that the hard way a few years earlier, whenever I had broken my neck.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm able to tell them that I'm don't have or that I'm deathly allergic to morphine. They get me strapped in, they get going down the road, and I can feel it. I mean, literally, it took the fire department maybe a minute to get there. The ambulance, probably not much more than that. All of this takes place in about 9 minutes because they got me from there to the hospital to the helicopter pad to fly me out to a trauma unit, all within about 9 minutes.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm telling you, dude, it was lightning quick, but a lifetime happened during that during that situation.
Oh, I'm sure.
So we get to the helicopter pad, and this really deep, I mean, it's the deepest voice I've ever heard of on any man, tells me everything is going to be okay. Tells me everything's going to get taken care of. And I'm telling you, man, it was the voice of God speaking to me through that paramedic. And I promise you, I couldn't see the guy, I couldn't have identified him. But if I'd have heard his voice anywhere else in the world, I would have known exactly who he was. That's just how unique this guy's voice is. So we're next thing you know, I wake up and I'm in Lubbock, Texas. I have no idea where I'm at. I wake up and I think partially I'm still in the moment, and uh, they wake me up and it's kind of a violent time. I wake up swinging and they tie me down and everything so I can't hurt myself anymore. And then the next thing I remember my I could see again at this point in time. My wife walks in and I started tearing up and I couldn't talk because they took me from Pampa, Texas to Amarillo where they did emergency tracheotomy surgery because my my airway had constricted around the original trach that they had put in because there was so much damage they couldn't intubate me regularly, so they had to do a complete tracheotomy right there on the helicopter pad. And that's another God thing, putting skilled hands right there, right then and there. So, we're going through all of this, and I discover that I can't talk, and I tear up, and I'm trying to talk, and of course I can't. My wife hands me a notebook and a pencil. I finally convinced them to let let one of my arms loose. They did, and I just I wrote to my wife. I said, I'm sorry, and she's kind of confused, like, what, why are you sorry? You didn't cause this. This isn't your fault. Well, no, none of that was true. That and but she shouldn't have also had to go through this. Just to kind of give you a little bit of backstory on my wife. At the time, me and her had been married exactly 6 months and 4 days. Okay, and her first husband, who was a um, Taylor County corrections officer in Abilene, Texas, had shot and killed himself. She's having to deal with another hugely traumatic situation. Then there's my mom. She comes in, and I'm the only child that my mom's got left. My oldest sister Kim was murdered in 1990. My other sister Stacy committed suicide in November of 2013, just a couple months before my dad passed away in 2014. Um, so my mom had, she'd been through the ringer, with personal tragedy and things, and but probably one of the biggest things that I really remember, which a lot of things are really hazy about that day, but there are just certain things that are really really stand out. Is I asked my wife if my preacher was coming, who, by the way, is a guy with another awesome name. His name is Dallas.
All
So,
right. Awesome.
you
We
know,
might have to call this the Texas show.
Yeah,
I'm,
absolutely.
I'm telling you, man, Dallas Stringer is one of the finest men that I know on the planet. Well, he was on his way down from Pampa, Texas to Lubbock, which is about a 3 hour trek, and I think he made it in about an hour and a half.
Wow.
You know, um, just trying to get there. He got in the room, and of course, I've got a million tubes coming out of me. I've got more dope pouring in me, man, than any crack house had ever seen before. I think so. I'm kind of in and out, but Dallas walks in, and I'd probably asked for him 100 times during that time. When's he coming? When's he coming? When's he coming? So I had my notebook there, and prior to meeting my wife and everything, I'd gone through a divorce, and then there was a guy that really poured uh, a lot of his time and his knowledge, and really really discipled me along. And he had this plaque in his office, and it was one that I always kind of admired whenever I was going through my divorce and everything with my first wife, and it really kind of helped me focus my strength. uh, Dallas got there, and I wrote the verse down, what I wanted him to read, because the situation in the room was so incredibly chaotic. Man, I had nurses, doctors, everybody, just kind of in panic mode. My wife was there. She's doing her very level best to keep everything together and to stay strong and to make sure, she's trying not to show me that she's scared to death, that she's scared out of her mind of what's fixing to happen. My mom is there, she's just praying to God, please don't take my last child. This is the only thing that I could think about. Um, I wrote down Exodus 14:14, which is kind of ironic in a roundabout way whenever you think about it here in just a second. And it says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only be quiet." I'm telling you, at that moment in time, whenever Dallas read that out loud, you could have heard a pin drop across the entire hospital. The 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 spirit of the room completely changed, and I needed that to happen. I needed the reminder that things were going to be okay. Because I was scared out of my mind. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't, because I was, because I just didn't know what was fixing to happen. So, there for a few days, I laid there in ICU and had very limited visitors. Of course, I mean, there was a ton of support at the time and everything. And I remember whenever the day came that they finally moved me to a regular room, the charge nurse came in and I started writing and asking her a few questions like, hey, how much longer am I going to have to be here? You know, am I going to, be able to get this trach out anytime soon? Things like that, um, and I was determined, to defeat what had been brought up against me. I was going to rise above and beyond this. Uh, and this is one of those things. I mean, she told me that you're probably gonna be in the hospital at least 6 weeks. You're gonna be in the hot, you're gonna have your trach for probably at least 30 days. And she told me, she goes, there's a very good chance you will never talk again. And
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh wow, you know. But I knew, I just knew that she was wrong. And plus, it kind of just, I'm not gonna lie, it just kind of flat pissed me off that she would tell me these things. Uh, and I think she probably used some of that to kind of maybe motivate me to get a little better, a little quicker.
Maybe.
I'm grateful that she was truthful. Uh, we're friends to this day because I was, in the darkest hour that I've ever faced in my entire life, I knew I had hope. As it says in Genesis 50:20, what you meant for evil, God meant for good and the saving of many lives. And that was part of one of the things that I used to help me recover. So we get into, they take out the trach on like the seventh day. Okay. Seven. Remember that number. Right? Okay. So they take that out. They actually change it out. They give me a smaller one. The one they gave me, man, I tell you, would have kept a freaking horse alive because it was so big.
Wow.
They take that out and they put the other one in. And I decided just to go ahead and give it a go and see what I could do. And I could talk. Wasn't very loud, but I could talk. So my vocal cords weren't damaged or anything like that. And which was probably great for my wife because I think she got tired of me snapping at her. That was the only time in my entire marriage that I'll ever be able to get away with just snapping my fingers at her. Uh,
I
but
was just going to ask you what you meant by snapping. I didn't realize because I can't snap my fingers, so I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
I snap my fingers to get her attention or anybody else's attention.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
So um, it was just one of those things. Through that time, I tell you what, man, God was really, really good. Um, but there was also, the times whenever I got back out of the hospital, the the times whenever things started going away, people started going back to their daily lives, and kind of essentially, I don't want to say that they were forgetting about you, but they had to go on with their lives too. And like, so many other officers that are out there, there was plenty of times that I wished I wouldn't have survived. Um, so I didn't have to endure the pain. So my wife didn't have to take care of the wounds that she was having to take care of.
What
I had
was the extent of your injuries? That the bullets or fragments. I mean, because it was birdshot. What was damaged when the fragments hit your face?
well, I tell you what, man, I had a giant hole in the side of my face. Um, my chin had completely separated from the mandible itself. I had to go in there and put that all back together, and uh, it had what the the rest of the shot that didn't hit me in my shoulder and in my right arm. So there was wounds there to be taken care of, and it hit me just right where the vest does not protect.
Oh,
Okay, I mean it couldn't have been more perfect right where it hit me. I mean, I've still got bird shot all in my face and in my arm and shoulder and everything. The stuff that they couldn't take out because it would have just caused more nerve damage than it was worth. But I had a giant hole in my face. You could see my tongue through. If you look through. And what few teeth were left that didn't get blasted out. Um, she was constantly having to take that. It severed a couple of saliva glands, which kept everything wet. I mean, it's essentially like just going and poking taking a pair of scissors to a water hose and watching it just leak out. So she was constantly having to change my dressings, and I freaking hated that because of what she had to look at. It scared me in a lot of different ways because in your weakest moments, that's whenever Satan seems to be at his loudest. Even though he's just whispering, it's at a roar. Okay,
right.
because you don't know what's fixing to happen, man. You don't know if you're fixing to lose your family. Uh, or, if she's going to decide, well, I can't handle this and go on. Thankfully, I've got an awesome wife that did not do that, man. You talk about somebody that stuck with me at a time that uh, a lot of people might not have otherwise done, and she did. And she truly loves me, and I love her, and um, you know, our marriage has handled that so far. So I think we're stuck with each other, and that's awesome.
Was there were you guys like a strong faith before this issue? Like you both had equal amounts of faith?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Back for a long time, I started my career in Texas in 1999, working for the Texas Department of Corrections. Then I went to the police academy in 2002, and um, so I've got 20 years under my belt now, and for a lot of those years, whenever I started working at the prison and becoming a cop, I didn't think that I needed God, and I ran from God, and I didn't really start going back to church till 2013. Um, and that was at the time, man. Whenever it's kind of odd how things happen, how God allows certain things to be moved from your life. At the time I was married to my first wife, and I knew things were rocky and hard, but I was like, and if anybody can fix anything, God can do it. So I started getting back into church and things of that nature, and thank God for my church because all of a sudden things just went south, and uh, you know got a divorce, and I don't know too many cops that hadn't been through that divorce, and that first one's usually pretty rough on them, and that's certainly going to be my last divorce, but my church family really took me in, and really they really kind of they did their best to shield me from some of the storm, or at least they guided me through some of my some of the really dark periods during that time. Uh, you know, there's a lot of people, and cops are insanely bad about it, but we won't talk to anybody else but another cop. Well,
Absolutely.
you know, there was one man. His name was Rick Pearson, and I love this man with all my heart. He has never been a cop in his life, but he's been in the ministry for a long time, and professionally, he's an exterminator. he had earned the right to be able to speak life into me, and to speak truth. um, and he there was a lot of times, man, where he would correct me, and talk to me and speak truth. And he was really part of the glue, uh, that God was pouring in to really keep my family together during this time of going through this shooting and things of that nature. And um, he guided me through a lot of things. Whenever I'd be having a really hard day, especially as fresh as things were, man. There were times that um, there were times that I spent hours in my bedroom by myself, just sobbing because I didn't understand what was going on. And to tell you that I never got mad at God would be a lie, because I did. Because I knew God didn't cause this, but I knew it was allowed for a purpose. There was a purpose there, and I knew that there was a purpose, but I didn't know what that purpose was. And you know how impatient cops are. If we don't know the facts right then and there, you know, we kind of throw temper tantrums, and we're like, you know, screw it. Let's just go on down the road, right?
Right.
Right. I don't know any
So,
cops like that.
yeah, yeah, you know, but it's a learning process, man.
Yeah, so let's go back to after you get transported to the hospital. I'm sure our listeners want to know what happened. Did they catch the guy? All that kind of good stuff. How they found him or
Yeah.
whatever.
The Okay, so the day that I got shot, the Amarillo Police Department SWAT team responded, uh, and took over the situation at that point in time. Our guys held the perimeter. Um, After several hours, my shooter came out, still had the gun in his hand, and he got shot twice. Lived.
Wow.
Um, from what I understand, he crashed 3 or 4 times on the ambulance, on the way to the hospital, and the paramedics were there to save their lives. And many of these paramedics that were working on him were people that I was friends with, people that I had ran on calls with. And after that, they wouldn't talk to me for a little while, and I had to figure out what the problem was. They were they were so concerned that
You'd be mad?
I would be that I would be mad at them for saving his life. And I had to go back, and was there a part of me that wished he was dead? Absolutely, there is. Absolutely, 100% undeniable. There was a part of me that wished he would have died. But then there was that other side, man, that had grace attached to it, because God had shown me grace. And I spoke with the paramedic that specifically worked on him that day, and I told her, I said, you had a job to do just like I did. And for me to sit there and ask you to not do your job would have been highly unethical. And I told her, I said, I don't hate you for doing your job. You saved his life. And I told her, I said, for some reason, if I'm alive, there's a reason. And I said, if he's alive, there's still a reason there too. I said, it doesn't matter how many times we shoot somebody, it doesn't matter what we do. We do not control if anybody lives or dies in any situation. There's God is the only one that controls that right there.
So if he's coming out with the zip gun or whatever it was still in his hand, you think he was trying to do a suicide by cop?
I think there was probably part of that going through his head at the time. I can't be for 100% certain what was going through his head right then and there.
Okay.
Um, you know, um, he had been, th- this guy had been on a meth binge for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Um, He had also had, and he was one of our local regulars that had moved in from uh, California because he had warrants for his arrest out of California, and of course California wouldn't extradite. He had two felony warrants out of Los Angeles County that, unless he was like right there in their jurisdiction, they weren't going to touch him.
Jeez.
Um, so he was a guy, man, that was kind of untouchable. We'd taken him to jail for numerous frivolous things. Petty theft. Um, you know, the occasional little amount of weed or something like that.
Hmm.
He's kind of one of our known thieves and burglar type guys and everything. But
So you said
uh,
the initial call came out, shot fired, at least one shot. So
yeah,
did y'all find a girlfriend? Was she okay? Did she get shot?
yeah. No, she was good. She was just fine. He had actually fired into the ceiling uh, to try to scare her, and she found a way to get herself out, and that's whenever they called 911 and uh, got us there because he had spent a good majority of the night whipping on her. Of course, they had both been um, on drugs for a little while and everything, and the only time that he wasn't beating her was whenever she was feeding their child.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
yeah,
So then you had to relive this whole situation in court, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But here's kind of a cool part. So we're sitting there the last day of the trial, and of course, most of the time, you know, they don't let any of us in the courtroom at all. So I didn't spend a whole lot of time at the courthouse during the trial at all, since they wouldn't let me be in the courtroom. There's no point in being there.
Okay.
Um, so, but the last day comes and I testify, and they the jury goes out for deliberations, and I'm sitting there in the courtroom uh, because I got to listen to the closing arguments of the defense and the prosecution. Um, and as the jury is exiting, my shooter turns around and looks at me. And of course, I'm not going to break eye contact with this guy because I want him to know I know exactly who he is. I know exactly what he looks like. And I'm going to tell you, man, there was a point in time where if you'd have given me 5 minutes with this guy, I'd have ripped that dude limb from limb. I would have taken my anger out on this guy.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So he turns around and he looks at me and he said, and he mouths, "I'm sorry."
Wow.
Boy, if God didn't just punch me in the gut right then and there, okay? So court goes into recess, and they take him into their holding cell, and um, his defense attorney comes walking down the aisle, and uh, she looks at me and she says, "Mr. Gass, I'm so sorry for the things that you've had to go through. I know it must have been harrowing and hard." And God just tugged on me, and I looked at her and I said, "Ma'am," I said, "and it's purely up to your client." I said, "But at the end of this, whenever they come back with their verdict and their punishment, or if however it goes," I said, "ask your client if he would allow me 5 minutes to speak with him." So obviously, like I said, God is really punching me in the gut right then and there. And I've got a couple of my brothers from church with me, and so we're sitting there, and she goes, "Okay." She goes, "I don't think that's gonna happen, but I'll ask him." She goes back and she asks him, and she goes, "He's agreed to talk to you." Okay, so they come back with the guilty verdict, and um, go into punishment phase, and they come back, and he's got 50 years TDC time to do. And at the end of that, there's nobody left in the courtroom but her, the bailiff, myself, and one of my very dearest friends, and the guy that shot me. They take us into another room, and of course, the bailiff and there was another deputy there. They're standing outside of the room, which has got a window in, because I think they're more afraid that I'm going to just rip this dude's head off
Absolutely.
than than they are of anything. My shooter starts talking and everything, and I stop him and I tell him, "Listen, dude," I said, "you ruined my life. You ruined the things that I could have been doing over the last few years." But I looked at him and I told him this. I said, "But I want you to understand something. I don't hate you. And in fact, there is a forgiveness in this room for you today that I cannot offer you." I said, "God is here and waiting for you." And then I looked at him square in the face and I told him, I said, "Listen," I said, "and if God is willing to forgive you, I forgive you too."
I got to know what he says.
He said, "Thank you." My friend was in there, and I looked at I looked at him and I said, "Man," I looked at my shooter and I said, "Do you mind if we pray?" And of course, he didn't have any objections, and the attorney didn't have any objections to that because she was standing in the room too. She wanted to be a witness, and I have no qualms with them at all because I understand, what they were originally thinking might happen, and justifiably so. So my friend Chris was in there with me, and he started praying, and myself and the shooter, his attorney, and my brother Chris, we held hands together and we prayed. We thanked God for the forgiveness that was given. We thanked God for the outcome of the day, but we also prayed God's guidance in his heart as he goes and serves his term in prison.
Man.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not going to lie to you when you said getting not to mess with that point you just made, but when you said he looked back at you and motioned something with his mouth, I thought I was waiting for you to say that he said something, cocky, but it's really surprising that he said that.
No, it really was.
You know what, Houston, the thing that really grabs me from this whole, we had no idea this was going to happen today. We had no idea we were going to talk to you on the phone. We had no idea we were going to tape this. And the fact that it's Easter Sunday and you were talking about grace and what occurred today in history is amazing to me.
One of the things, man, as I've gotten asked to speak at different churches and things, or various other events, God put on God put on to me. He gave me a verse that I got that I use from time to time, and it's Psalm 118, verse 17 through 20, and it says, "I shall not die, but I shall live and recount the deeds of the Lord. The Lord has disciplined me severely, but he has not given me over to death. Open to me the gates of righteousness that I may enter through them and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord, the righteous shall enter through it." It took me a while to get to that point to where I could sit there and say that I shall not die. I had to make the choice to live. I had to want to survive too. God didn't God didn't do it just to do it. He gave us free will. And I'm so thankful for that. No matter how angry we can get with God, no matter how engulfed in our anger we can be, God still has the grace for us, and God gives us the choice. And it's just what we do with what God gives us and the choices that we make. And whenever I consider the things that I've gone through, I praise God for every one of them. It is it has formed me into the man that I am today. Because I'm going to tell you, had this not happened, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't be the man who I am today. I wouldn't have experienced the things that I've experienced, as hard and as trialsome as they may have been. And you talk about what today is, being Easter Sunday, and the grace that God has shown, and we're here celebrating our Savior's resurrection. But I was in church today, and this really hit me. This is a song by Elevation Worship, called "Resurrecting," and the chorus goes a little bit like this. It says, "By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory." That was one of the reasons why God kept me here, man, because I want to declare the victory. I know there's a lot of guys that's been wounded in the line of duty, whether it was physically or psychologically. I want to put a message out there to these guys, man, that you can survive, but you have to make the choice to want to live, to see the grace that God has given, and that you can rise from the ashes of defeat. I want these guys to know that suicide is not an option. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I want these guys to know that there are people out there like myself and like you guys that love them enough that we'll sit there and we'll listen. And if listening's not enough, you know what? I know people that can find people that get them help. And we can do it completely aside from their department, and their department doesn't have to know anything about it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And you're right. I love the way you said that because it's so true. It's a permanent, say it again, because that was so powerful the way you put that into words.
It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Man, that's so powerful. And I think a lot of men and women in law enforcement don't realize that there is a solution to the situation, and they have to hold on, and they have to look to others. Uh, the bird dog and I were talking about this, and I actually think I said it on one of our podcasts where I needed backup at a time where I was in trouble, man. I needed my 94 to come save me from a situation, and I called Danny. I called the one person that I knew would come, and he came. And just like with God, you have to ask for the help, and He will come every time.
Every time. You know, it's like I told you guys, man, there were those times where um that I wished I would have died and made the ultimate sacrifice, for a number of different reasons. The physical pain of going through some of the things that I was dealing with. It that just absolutely sucked. I mean, there's no other way to describe it but that. Plus too, I mean, I go from making 100% of my wages down to making 70%. So, you got the financial aspect of things. But then you've also got the relational side of things, because it changes your relationship with those who are around you. You got certain people that will stick close to you, closer than a brother. And then you've got the ones that whom you thought were your brothers that will run the opposite direction and try to get away from you as quick as possible. And unfortunately, the thin blue line, and what I'm about to say is controversial, but the thin blue line is very weak whenever it comes to the support of their brothers that have been significantly wounded in the line of duty. Cops do not like to stare at the truth and at the things that could potentially happen to them. We don't like it, period.
You're
I
right.
am one of them. I do not like it. But if we can get more cops, if we can get more first responders, more paramedics, more firemen, more nurses, more whoever, more dispatchers following what God's plan was, that thin blue line will turn into a thin blue chain and it will become unbreakable because we have entrenched it with the blood of Christ around it. And once that the blood of Christ is touched can no longer be broken.
Right. And going back to what you said about the how cops are, it's just like any situation. And I'm sure after that happened to you, everybody was super careful for the next month or two, or maybe even a few months past that, or it could be a year. But eventually, everybody starts getting lax again. And
Exactly.
that brings me to my next question: is was there any did any training come out of this?
Danny, before he answers that question, I want to throw this in there too because before we started the show, Houston was telling me about a horrible statistic for his region with officer involved shootings. Houston, will you share us that and then go into the answer for that next thing that Danny just asked you?
Remind me a little bit of what we were
Um,
discussing.
that the officer involved shootings that the officers weren't surviving.
Yeah. Okay. So here in the Texas Panhandle, it seems like there wasn't any any officer that had ever been shot up here never survived. Every one of them have died, and I kind of seem to be the anomaly there, uh, where I actually live. For whatever reason, you know, was there any specific training that came out of that? Probably not, because things here in the Texas Panhandle, though that sort of thing that happens so rarely that I think you would have had a better chance of hitting the lottery twice and catching a unicorn in the same day.
I got you. I'm sure the sergeants, during roll call, or lieutenants, or whoever conducted your roll calls, went over the situation and maybe talked about it at
Oh,
least.
they did. They had a debriefing. I can't explain to you exactly what their debriefing was because
You weren't there,
I
obviously.
wasn't there for any of that. Um, you know,
That's
there was
understood.
there was a lot of things that happened behind the scenes. You know, the department that I worked for, they they did not stand behind me or my family after
Ugh,
a couple months.
another
Um,
situation like that. I'm sick and tired of hearing about stuff like that.
but, I'm going to tell you, whenever that first happened, I mean that really just tore my gut apart to sit there and think that I had gone to war with these guys, fought many battles with these guys, went to hundreds of calls with these guys, domestic disturbances, robberies, homicides, uh, burglaries in progress, all kinds of violent crime that was going around. Been in, you know, I've sweat blood with these guys. We've cried together, and then the next thing you know, they're gone.
Hmm.
And that's okay though. That's okay. I mean,
Well,
it's not okay.
that's
It's not okay, but it's okay because there's a certain reason why God removes you from certain things. And whatever that reason is, I mean, I still wonder from time to time, but at the same time, you have to question, you have to question, would it be worth going back? And did I go back to work? Yes, I did. Did I go back to that department? No, I couldn't. Um, but I don't hate those guys for anything. Things happen, and once I started figuring out that I wasn't the only one that had ever had their back turned, from a department, and started seeing how prevalent that was, that gave me an area of which I could speak to another officer about. As they were going through things like that, other officers that have been wounded in the line of duty. I tell you, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard. I can't count them. I just can't.
Hmm.
Of how their departments, their cities, and things like that had um, turned on them. And
Houston, you said something at the beginning that was very big, and it was you were there, and your shift was short. People, you're working short. You go to a shots fired call, and in our department, that'd have been a SWAT call out right there. We never would even got to the door, but
see,
because of manpower issues, you guys had to go beyond what most agencies would do today.
yeah, we are the SWAT team in our department. We didn't. Um, you know, the biggest agency to us, closest to us, was Amarillo Police Department, and they have probably 300, 400 officers. And the next largest department in the Texas Panhandle area was Pampa, Texas, where I was at. So we didn't have all that fancy SWAT equipment. We didn't have the luxuries of having a bomb squad team. We didn't have the luxuries of having a SWAT team or any other team. We were kind of the jack of all trades uh, in this, which kind of seems to be that way for a lot of your smaller agencies. You kind of got to do a little bit of everything um, to accomplish your job at the end of the day.
Right. And that brings us to our next point about that our society, because we have a lot of listeners that aren't law enforcement officers that are hearing this they're hearing this show for the very first time. And they need to understand that our communities, our neighborhoods, the places that our police officers and deputies are protecting us aren't always funded the most, aren't always trained with the latest technology or the skill set. Yet you brave men and women that we were part of for so many years still go out every day to tackle the situations, because when that 911 call comes in and our dispatcher takes it and they give us that call, we go. We don't go, you know what, we don't have enough people tonight, we don't have the latest training, we say we just go. And people like Danny and I, who have spent almost 50 years in law enforcement alone, that's in our DNA, because we're here to protect and serve that community. Whether they love us or hate us, we still show up to do our jobs every day of the year,
Yeah.
365 days a year.
And it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, what's your sexuality, what's your color, race, religion. None of that comes into consideration for any of us whenever we go to these situations, because we did take an oath. We swore to protect Constitution, uphold the laws of our state, and protect the people in our jurisdictions. And
And Houston, I'm sorry, go ahead.
regardless of who you are, what you are, or anything, I took the oath and I took it seriously, and I will always go to that call regardless.
So Houston, when you took that oath, was your hand placed on a certain book?
Absolutely, man. I laid my hand on the Bible and raised my hand and swore before God and all men that I would do the best of my ability every day.
So we know that prisoners receive Bibles in jail, in prison. Yet a lot of schools in our country have outlawed prayer and patriotism. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a big crock of you know what. You know, we're falling away in our society in such a way that the kids are not being brought up in the way that they should go. The Bible clearly gives us a mandate to train our children in the way that they should go. That way, whenever they get to that age, they do not depart from it. We, as men in our society, women in our society, we got to get back to the basic fundamentals of what the Bible teaches. Because if we don't, our country is truly going to hell in a handbasket.
And Danny, what does Bible stand for?
Basic instructions before leaving Earth.
I mean, how much simpler can when you always hear these things about, kids don't come with instructions. Well, we're children of God and he gave us instructions. Why are we not using that to raise our children anymore?
I don't know. I think we've overcomplicated things, and I think to a large degree, we've allowed technology and things to come into our homes and raise our children for us because we have this thought of the so-called American dream, if you will, and it's pulled our families apart. It's taken our wives out of the home. It's uh, taken our taken our men out of the home, and it's gotten us to a point to where we're working so hard for things that are obviously not going to last or matter, that we forget about God.
And Houston, I'm sure you can. Well, I'm pretty sure you can probably tell me exactly where this is in the Bible. But when we came into this world, we came in with nothing, and when we leave this world, we're going to go out with nothing
Yep.
except for one thing.
Yep. Exactly.
I knew you knew this answer before
Yeah.
I asked it.
Yeah. You're talking about Job 121. Naked I came into this world. Naked I shall return. And you know, it's true. We came in with nothing, and we're leaving with nothing. So why are we breaking our backs and killing ourselves for the latest, greatest something that next week is going to be outdated because the next latest, greatest thing that's going to come out? And we've created a cycle it's horrible.
Right. And then to add to that is, and I want to, and I'm sorry, I'm not as well versed in the Bible that I should be to be talking about faith today. But as I'm learning, if you do the right things, you don't have to know exactly everything, but it is a big part of it. And when you come in the world with nothing, and you leave the world with nothing, and it's a letter. I want to say it's from Luke, or it might be, and he says, except for one thing, and that's the good you do for other people.
Absolutely.
And as
And
law enforcement officers and military and first responders and teachers and parents, That's the one thing, is to raise our children with the guidelines that were given to us
You know,
2,000 years ago.
God gave us a command to discipline our children and to train them in the way that they should go. And whenever we took out God first, and then we started taking the discipline away from our schools, then we slowly started trying to take the discipline away from parents in our society through various court rulings, through whatever liberal ideology anybody wants to possibly think of. You know, we're we're doing our kids and our families a huge disservice by taking those two things away, God and discipline. And I was raised I was raised in a very God-fearing home. I was uh, one of the lucky, blessed people whose parents did not get divorced. My parents stayed together till the day from the day they got married till the day my dad died. They truly meant, their marriage vows. They took those. I wished I could say that I was lucky enough to never have experienced a divorce, but then again, also too, I also look at that as a blessing. I mean, you just have to. It's all about perspective a lot of times too. You know, we've got to get back to the basics of life, and the basics of life come straight out of the Ten Commandments, come straight out of the New Testament, come straight out of Revelation, Genesis, Exodus, whatever. Pick anywhere in that Bible you want to. And we need to stop letting technology raise our children, and we need to raise them ourselves. We need fathers in the homes, we need mothers in the home, and we need both of them to be dedicated to each other and to God, but to God first. Marriage second, kids third, in that exact order. And then our career. We don't need to be thinking about anything else other than that in that exact order.
Well, I agree 100%. We're asking people to raise our children. It has to start at home, because if a teacher disciplines a child and the parent doesn't follow up at home, then you're confusing the child. And we have a set guideline. And then trying to make law enforcement, like, how many times have you heard a parent say, "Well, if you don't behave, he's going to take you to jail"? Danny, how many times have you heard that in your career?
Oh, a million.
Oh,
What would you say to that, Houston?
I got something. You say, Houston,
Say,
we have a problem.
that is 100. That is the best. You're right, Houston. We do have a problem.
man, we do, and it's of epidemic proportions, and it's sad because I see so many officers that are out there and they're not seeing the whole picture. They're not prepared for what could be, what might happen. Um, you know, I would encourage each and every officer out there, to take a moment of introspection and start looking and seeing where you can improve yourself, where you can improve your relationship with God. Let God examine you and show you the things that need to be taken care of. Take care of those things. Take care of your relationship with Jesus first. Take care of your relationship at home. Uh, Prepare your loved ones for the day that you might not get to come home, whether you're dead, still alive, or in the hospital. Prepare them, talk to them, show them that you care enough about them that you're going to prepare them. Even though we're never ever prepared for things that we think that we're ready for, at least there was a little bit of training and care taken there for when something could go really south.
You're 100% right on that one. Houston, tell us about some of the programs that you guys have in Texas that you've been working with that have helped you, and some of the things that you're doing as you share your story about what happened to you and what's going on in law enforcement.
Well, one of the biggest ones that I volunteer with is the Peace Officer Angel Foundation, located out of Dallas. They're there to assist wounded officers in their time of need. They provide a vast amount of emotional support from guys that have been there, done that, and survived. Okay, so me and my wife are currently working on the retreat side of things, and we tend to keep things kind of small. That way, things are more comfortable, a little more intimate with other officers and things like that. That get together, and plus it keeps a degree of comfort there to where they can talk back and forth to each other. And then there's also the Emergency Operations Proving Grounds that is coming in. We're coming together and putting together training for active shooters, and um, preparing other people other than law enforcement. Now we are preparing law enforcement as well, um, for that, but the biggest area of my interest there is what EOPG is doing with wounded officers and taking the time out for them. And that's essentially where my real big passion is for the guy that's been wounded and forgotten, been there and doesn't know how to handle what's going on in their daily lives. And so from that side of things, what EOPG is doing, bringing in warriors to where they can be comfortable with one another, and most importantly, meeting them exactly where they're at, not having any expectation of anything else but exactly who you are and where you're at. And that is biblical, because Christ met you, he met me exactly where we were. He didn't expect us to clean up our lives and do this and do that and be perfect in all these other ways. Whenever we met him, he met us. He called us to him, and he is the one that is going to take care of the rest of it. And that's essentially what we want to do. With EOPG, we're also working on certain things to where we want to have, marriage conferences and things with law enforcement officers' families, um, because we do have such a exponentially high rate of divorce in law enforcement. I think the average marriage in law enforcement, the average chance of you getting divorced is probably 75% or greater today. That's half again higher than what your average civilian marriage is like. It's bad enough that in the civilian world it's at 50%, 55%, but you get into public service like we're in, it just raises that much higher because of the different things that we deal with.
Right. So it sounds like there's two different entities that you were talking about. There's the Police Officers Angels Foundation. That's
Yes.
one. And then what was the other initials? And then how do they contact that? Can they just Google that and get their contact information? And they're located where?
Okay. Peace Officer Angel Foundation can be located on the World Wide Web at poaf.org, and they are located out of Dallas, Texas. And the Emergency Operations Proving Grounds can be found on the web at eopgglobal.com. Uh, and they are located in Jacksboro, Texas, um, which is kind of a small community just north of the Dallas area. It's kind of funny how both of them are really close together, but Both of them are great organizations, and they're bringing things to the table that for cops, man, that are unprecedented. They're bringing a sense of family and friendship with experience, with many years of experience uh, behind their belt. With counseling, with peer support, with spousal support, uh, because that's important too. Because so oftentimes, in an officer's life, especially a wounded officer's life, we don't take into consideration that our spouses have been wounded too, and they put up with so much and they deal with so much, and that's why there's such a push towards those things with those two organizations.
Now, Houston, if do you go and do talks to organizations, law enforcement, different organizations out there? Do you do that as well in Texas, or do you travel around to do that?
I do a little bit of both. I'll travel and I'll stay local. I go around the state, or I'll go to New York. I'll be in New York Father's Day weekend at the Leo weekend that the state of New York is putting on, and getting to put on um, a seminar, and I have titled it "More Than Mere Survival." So, uh, you know, if anybody is interested, you can contact me through my professional page on Facebook, which is Officer Houston Gas, which has got my email address and things like that attached to it.
All right, very well. So we're going to post that, and we're actually working on, and I would say Danny's working on an affiliate page for our website so that we can have that information readily available for our listeners or any organization that wants to contract with our incredible speakers and guests on our show, that they can come and talk to your organization with your specific needs in mind, to share not only his amazing faith, but his resiliency and his unbelievable courage facing these obstacles. Bird Dog,
Yes, sir.
what would you like to ask Houston at this point?
Actually, I want to ask him one question, but then I got something to say about this whole situation. First of all, I think I remember you saying that you went back to work, so you're still a police officer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. That's great. So I just wanted to tell you that we've done these podcasts for quite some time now, and I listen to what everybody says for sure, but sometimes I'm fiddling around on a computer as I do it, and this entire story, your everything you said just had me like I didn't touch my computer one time this show, so I think that's a testament to you and your story, and it was just awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that with us and our listeners.
I tell you what, man, I thank both of you guys for the opportunity to tell it.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show today. Your story is extremely not only inspiring, but it shows an incredible amount of faith in God. And as usual, the Bird Dog, your skills at handling all the stuff behind the scenes does not go unnoticed, and the show wouldn't even be produced if it weren't for your tenacity and dedication to Adopt a Cop USA and the citizens of our country and all of our law enforcement officers as well. So thank you again for all your work. Please tell our listeners how they can contact us on our social media outlets.
You can contact us. That well, we have a great website. If you ever have a few minutes and you want to check us out, it's www.myaacusa.org. And that stands for basically adopt the AAC is adopt a cop, and then USA, obviously everybody knows what that's for. So again, www.myaacusa.org. And then we have our social media platforms on Facebook. We have 3 different Facebooks. Our main Facebook page is Adopt a Cop USA official site. And don't forget the official site, because there is a couple other things that say Adopt a Cop. I think there's like a prayer group, and then there's something else. But always look for the official site. And we have the Sergeant Frank's Bird Dog Posse. That's something we do with our law dog and our characters in the schools. And then we have the Adopt a Cop USA Outdoor Crusaders. And that deals with our hunting, fishing, escapades, and outdoor things that we do with the kids.
So please visit our social media sites and share our stories. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to our special guest, Houston Gass, an amazing American hero.
Listen, young one, it's not cool to be a thug. There is nothing good about going selling drugs. The money don't mean nothing.